All right. Welcome to another edition of the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Adam Stevens, and I'm here with Olin Beck, who's the CEO of Watt Power and has a background in biotechnology and biology, right? And
Yep.
we'll let him introduce himself a little bit so you can get to know a little bit of his background. Go ahead, Olin.
Yeah, my name's Olin Beck. I've worked in biotech for a number of years, predominantly in the startup space, doing everything from raising money to technical development and being the janitor. So little bit of everything in the startup world there. Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of things that was learned along the way, and then now working on still a chemistry-driven company, but more in the energy space.
Awesome. As I understand it, you did some undergraduate or some research here at BYU originally, some cancer research. Is that correct? You want to tell us a little bit about that background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied biochemistry at BYU in the phenomenal chemistry and biochemistry department. They have a very rigorous and excellent program there. The undergraduate research that is available to students on campus is unparalleled from what I have seen. And so I actually did work in two labs while I was on campus. One was an organic synthesis lab, and the other one was a biophysics lab. We did end up with a paper published from the biophysics lab while I was an undergraduate. And that was very nice thing to add to the undergraduate resume, if you will. Um, but most importantly was learning the different processes for research and development, as well as the education that came along with all of that. So the actual learning from the classes and how to apply things as compared to, forgetting it. So I use it pretty much every day in the work that I'm doing now and have for my whole career. So that was really good. And then specific to the cancer research, I was a cancer research fellow, which is now, I believe, the Simmons uh, Foundation along those lines at BYU. That was a phenomenal research experience, taking up an entire summer. They do it for undergraduates and graduate students. And uh, there was a lot to learn there. I was actually working in the biophysics lab for that particular fellowship, but we learned a lot about the interactions of various chemotherapy drugs on the cell membranes and changes in the cell membranes due to those.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about your path from how you ended up from a biology, biosciences researcher to entrepreneurship and leading a new company.
It's a great question. Yeah, and it's a little bit funny because I started into the path before I was done at BYU. There was a few family life events that led into the path. A major one was working with a dentist who was interested in being able to deliver anesthesia without performing an injection into the site. So, and that can be for your mentalis, or the big goal would be your rear nerve back here in the back. Those are typically the ones that hurt when you go into the dentist's office. So we were designing a patch that could accomplish that. And that was really interesting. We were able to get it to probe down to bone, and I led the product development in that regard, and it was very interesting. And yeah, that hooked me pretty quickly. So I kept at it after that, and soon after started a cancer research company, and then a number of years after, a drug delivery company that I worked on, another drug delivery company thereafter. So the cancer research company was primarily working with large molecules and delivering a brand new platform for cancer drugs throughout the body. And then the other drug delivery project that I worked on was delivering large molecules orally, so through the intestines, and that was a very interesting project as well.
Sounds like you also had maybe some ground floor experience. You mentioned being a janitor.
No, in the startup world, you do a little bit of everything. So, typically cash is tight and you're not going to pay for all the various extremities. And when I got started in the space, a number of the options that we now have for shared workspace, among others, didn't exist. So, yeah, we did everything from administering the finances of the company and working on balance sheet financials to really the fundamentals of the technology and then taking out the trash. Yep, we did everything.
Did you find that your experience at BYU, in addition to just getting started in the whole entrepreneurial world as a student, how did that influence your path toward entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so the most important thing that I learned at BYU during my education was how to learn. Uh, the greatest value, especially when you're doing entrepreneurship and working in new markets. And for me, commonly that's in, a very technologically intensive space. You need to be able to learn really fast. No one knows all the pieces that are necessary to actually accomplish the job and get the company to where it needs to be. So you have to be able to learn really fast, fill in for blind spots, and also be able to figure out who you need to add to the team in order to fill in the gaps that you have as an individual. And BYU was phenomenal for guiding along that path and really teaching its students how to learn. That is by far the most valuable resource that BYU can offer. Doing that in a service mindset is also very valuable. And then I'd also add that the BYU library is an incredible resource to this day. Even with everything that we have online, that is by far one of the most valuable resources that I've ever encountered. So that's out there for me.
Hey, you mentioned, filling in the gaps in your knowledge, and your skill set, with the right people around you. And, I contrast that a little bit with a statement a minute ago that you said that, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. How do you strike that balance of knowing when to try to do it yourself versus, filling in a gap by getting somebody else to take on a step?
Well, it's a really tricky balance because there's always a question of if you can learn it quickly enough and that preserves the cash so that you can then deploy the necessary resources or skill set that is required for a given project versus bringing people on. And bringing people on is a time intensive process as well. So we're always trying to balance recruitment because there's always gaps. We always have things that we need help on with being able to catch on quickly. And if nothing else, then to be able to evaluate people that we are recruiting and their background and expertise.
Yeah.
So predominantly, we will try to recruit these days to bring in people who can fill in gaps, but we do try and brush up as quickly as we can on any additional information for experts that we're trying to add to the team as we're doing that process. So for the most part, running it parallel.
All right. Well, I'd like to give our viewers a little bit of a background on what Watt Power is all about. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Watt Power, how it came to be, and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Watt Power, we are working in the energy space as previously indicated, and the core concept is that we have a catalyst that can convert sugars into electricity. And so we've shown with a number of waste sugar streams that we can create electricity or make valuable products out of those waste streams. On top of that, it appears that there are some opportunities for carbon capture or at least carbon sequestration as part of the process. But in reality, the biggest driver for the company is that we are creating greater value out of our customers and partners' waste. And that's fundamentally the problem that they need solved, is creating more value out of their waste. And when we're talking about the waste here, we're talking about, thousands of tons of waste a year. So the amount of waste sugars in these coming from facilities or the groups that we work with, their waste streams, is much larger than I ever could have anticipated, not having touched that world before. So there is an enormous amount of material that they have to deal with, and it is a necessary thing that they have to deal with every single day. So fundamentally, that's the core of what we're trying to do, is to deploy this catalyst in ways that increase the value of the waste streams from our customers. That can be done in a few ways. We're working on some fuel cell applications for this, which would return energy to the customers or to the grid. We are working on additional valuable byproducts that would be generated by the catalyst. And then those can include things like formate or potentially hydrogen. So those are the pieces that we have the basic understanding of at this point. We've still got a long ways to go. We're definitely still in startup mode, and we're working to further understand the market and its needs, and to make sure that we're working on the right things. But we're showing significant progress, I would say.
Yeah, is within the scope of what you feel like you can disclose to a general audience. Is there a particular success you can talk about?
Yeah, so we recently closed our initial funding round. That was about 3.3 million in funding. That would be from a strategic partner. We did not go to traditional institutional investors for that. So we are excited to be moving forward in that regard, and working with the strategic partner in order to start deploying the technology after scaling it up. So that's the biggest recent win. We're seeing a lot of strong indicators across the markets that we're looking at that there is a lot of value in what the catalyst can bring to the markets. So there is a great need for what we think we can provide to those markets and customers.
And as I understand it, your technology is fairly capital intensive to get up and running. I mean, compared to some of the other startups that maybe some of our other entrepreneurs have seen in our podcast today.
That is likely the case. And I probably have a poor frame of reference for that, because my frame of reference is in biotech, where the timelines and capital required in order to get a commercial product are extraordinarily high. So compared to that, most of this feels like it's very low capital intensive. But compared to other products like software, some other hardware products, yes, it would be more capital intensive. There is a very important R&D component to what we're doing. And then scale up is also fairly capital intensive for mass producing the various components of the fuel, well, the catalyst components.
Yeah.
So for fuel cell or other projects.
Well, and from your perspective and what you're doing now, as well as your biotech, cancer research, other startups that you've done, what should entrepreneurs that are thinking about getting into these longer time frame fields, what should they know as they're starting to make that jump?
Yeah, the most important thing is that you need to like solving hard problems, because they will represent an abundance, and it will carry on for a very long time, probably much longer than any of us think when we're doing this. There's a certain natural optimism for entrepreneurs. If you didn't think that it was possible, you probably wouldn't do it. So I think that's an important piece for entrepreneurs. Don't lose that, especially when you're in the weeds and things are hard and you're trying to figure out how anything will work. So that's a really valuable component. For those of us with a technical background, it does help to learn some things in accounting and finance. That tends to be very, very helpful. I had to learn that after leaving BYU, but I had some great mentors and some great people that I could rely on, as well as read a lot in order to get up to speed, at least at a basic level, on those elements and pieces. So those are probably the most important things. You know, there's a little bit of masochism probably in being entrepreneurial, especially on really hard tech projects like this, and that commonly come out of universities. There's amazing technology coming out of universities all around the country, and there's a lot of challenges to solve in moving that from the research lab into a commercial space. So that's a necessary component to be able to have the vision, not get lost in the weeds, and then to just be willing to attack the hard problems each and every day.
You said masochism. I think a lot of people say patience, but I think maybe your word's a better word for it.
Yeah, it's I mean, patience is certainly necessary, but there's an interesting balance between perhaps what I would typically think of as patience and being incredibly active in trying to accomplish what you can. And you can't do everything, so you have to be patient with all the problems that you can't handle for a given day or week, and really focus in on the ones that you believe you can approach immediately.
Okay. So your technology that you're working with now incorporates some BYU licensed technologies. What was your experience like licensing technology from BYU?
It was fantastic, actually. The process was incredibly quick. I've worked on a number of licenses over my career so far, and we were able to obtain assignment from BYU for the technology. It was a very rapid process. The steps were very clear. Some of that may be having had previous experience in licensing technologies that also facilitated, but the tech transfer office was very amenable to work with, very responsive, and yeah, really made it a very clear process and a way to accomplish exactly what was in the best interest of the company.
Were there any specific advantages or disadvantages that you encountered in dealing with our office?
Yeah, so the biggest advantages I would say are the speed with which the office is willing to move, and there is some flexibility that we experienced, in order to specifically address the needs of the company that we're working on, and those will vary from industry to industry, whether you're in life sciences and working on a diagnostic or a new drug company versus if you're in software or if you're in energy like we are. So the flexibility and the insight to be able to tailor the terms to what we needed as a startup in this space was really fantastic. The other piece there that I would not reduce at all is the ability to obtain an assignment. So that's not possible with all technologies, and especially not all technologies out there in the broader world, let alone at BYU. But BYU certainly has the flexibility in order to be able to do that when it is possible, and that is a large value add for a company.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that we try to do as much as we can here at BYU. Obviously, there are constrictions on government-funded type things where the government has an interest in the technology, in which case we can't assign it in those cases. Like you said, there are those strictures, but it is something that I think BYU excels at, in the ability to be more flexible in our arrangements, such that we can do assignments in a lot of cases, and I think that's a good thing. A question I had, I've not ever talked with this about you. I mean, I'm newish here to the office. How did you originally connect with this technology to license it?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a colleague for a number of years that I currently work with as well, who is doing some research and looking into technologies at BYU, and he met with the inventors of the technology, and then came back to me and said, I don't know that I have the expertise in order to be able to evaluate this. He doesn't have a technical background, even though he's an incredibly bright guy. So he asked me to take a look at it. And the potential there seemed readily apparent to me. So it was purely through referral in that regard. I had interacted with the inventors of the technology previously, so it was easy to reconnect in that regard as well. But yeah, we were introduced back into the system through the referral.
Oh, good. So referrals are always an amazing thing. They do get a lot done in this world.
That they do.
How does the technology integrate into what you're doing? Is it a big piece, a small piece, medium piece? How does it all work out?
The technology is really the core of what we're trying to do. So the critical insights that have been made for this technology over the past 10 years are really the founding idea behind the company and its products. So it is essential to what we are doing, and the company was created specifically around the potential of the core chemistry that was identified.
And how has it impacted your business model?
Well, the business model, I would say, continues to evolve as we continue to understand the market further, and as we match that with what the technology is capable of. So it has had a large impact on the business model, with the caveat of we're still learning. Things continue to evolve in that space as we try and meet the needs of the market as best we can.
Sounds like the market's maybe changed your direction. How has that changed over you said 10 years that you've been working with this?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I should clarify that I've only been involved for just over a year. The inventors of the technology have been working on this for at least 10 years, so they've been at it for a long time. As we've gone out to the market, there are additional opportunities in the space compared to the original hypothesis that we would have gone out approaching them with. So one of the early hypotheses that we've gone out with is around doing this as a CapEx purchase for facilities, and then they can install them and they can reap the benefits overwhelmingly. An important early learning in the process was that the additional byproduct that would be created by the conversion of the catalyst from sugars to formate or other byproducts, managing those byproducts becomes critical. And so having the logistics ability and partners in place to be able to manage those byproducts certainly affects the business model. Further, for many customers, there seems to be more inclination towards other ways of increasing the revenue stream that's not necessarily through a CapEx purchase, but that would be through either a power purchase agreement or some sort of offtake of the byproducts. So that really is where the value would be created for a customer.
How did Watt Power go about identifying its potential clients and the markets that it could try to get into?
So initially, we identified different markets based on what we could ascertain about their waste streams. So whether that's dairy or paper or lumber, we were looking at the waste streams and what was readily available in the resources, whether at the library or through the internet, and what we could discover there. Once we had a very basic level feel for what those were, it was very critical for us to do interviews, and it remains critical for us to do interviews and discussions with people that are actually in that market, so that are dealing with the waste streams, so that we can fully understand it. And it becomes very important in all of our understanding of the economics of the market, whether or not they're doing something with the waste stream right now, or if they're selling it, or if they have to pay for it to be removed. All of those factors contribute to our understanding of what's feasible from an economic perspective for the company.
And then you're innovating around the answers you're getting back.
Yes. So then we bring that data back inside, and then as a team, we discuss the best approaches that we can use to deploy the catalyst around those pieces of data.
So how as a CEO do you foster this innovative culture in your business to like you say, get the best results for your customers and for the company?
Yeah, so at this stage of the company, it's very important to still be experimental, if you will, in what we are trying to accomplish. So that can be both from the business side of things as well as from the technical development side of things. There are things that we have to test on the technical side that remain important to validate the thesis for the technology and the ability to deploy it at scale. And then on the business side, we're also forming new hypotheses around what do we believe is the greatest value to the market. And although both of those pieces, both the business side and the technical development side, are much more refined than they were a year ago. We always approach it as there is much more to learn and there are many more questions to answer. So we continue to form hypotheses and go out and interview or interact with customers to test those hypotheses and see if we're missing anything or if we're wrong about things. Because most certainly we have been wrong about things and we probably will be wrong about some other things in the future.
I assume, based on things you said, that you're continuing to work with BYU researchers as you're continuing to get the technology fully ready for market. What's that experience been like, and what's been the best part of that experience?
Yeah, so BYU researchers are amazing. They are excellent to work with and very knowledgeable. In order to instill that ability to learn and a deep set of knowledge into its students, the professors have to be of an incredibly high caliber. And they've been able to continue to work on the core chemistry questions and the really core developmental questions that enable the technology to take the next steps into manufacture, scale up, and deployment at commercial scale.
So, what advice would you have for other researchers at BYU or at any other university for that matter, that are looking to commercialize their invention or their technologies?
It is an incredibly worthwhile endeavor, and it will be incredibly difficult at the same time. It is a hard effort to do, and I don't know that I would say that it's for everyone or even for most. It is a very challenging objective to achieve, to take something that is almost a pure act of creation in a laboratory or inside the university, and then to try and deploy that out into the real world and to meet with the inevitable no's and the redirections and trying to really understand how one's technology actually makes sense out in the broader world. It's incredibly difficult, but incredibly rewarding. So I'm certainly encouraging of it, but there's a lot to learn, and it's really challenging. So if one is up for embracing the challenge and all of its various aspects, from finance to technical development, all of the other pieces for running the business, then yeah, it's an incredibly rewarding process. It'll likely take a few years before it feels very rewarding.
Well, fortunately, that works really well for those that want to be as involved as maybe some of the researchers are. But for those that don't want to be as involved, they can let the TTO find someone that wants to do most of the legwork, and they can just collaborate on an ad hoc or as needed basis, and they can do the generative creation part and leave the hard work up to the Olin Becks of the world to do the rest. Any pitfalls that researchers should avoid as they look at getting involved in this kind of thing?
In the early days, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns that are going to have to be figured out. Uh, Typically in the entrepreneurial realm, we would talk about that as the twists and turns that you're trying to get to product market fit with. So that's really understanding the market and their adoption curves, and if they're willing to pay and how much they're willing to pay for a given product, and the best way to then get market adoption for the company. And then for the researchers, there's a certain value in being able to not completely dive in and risk the salary and all the other things that come with completely committing to the actual uh, company. And so there's value there. And in those cases, scientific advisory boards should be utilized very heavily. So that is a great way for a researcher who has a good technology but doesn't want to take the big leap to continue to participate with the company and lend their expertise and insight to that company. And so that would be an alternative to diving in headfirst.
Yeah. There's opportunities for people that don't have their own inventions to still be involved in entrepreneurship as you say, as a scientific advisory board, uh, providing input and guiding things and maybe staying connected to people that they've mentored as students and such that are in entrepreneurship. So I think that's great. Speaking of staying connected, as a BYU student, I know that BYU maintains a broad alumni network. Has that what kind of influence has that had in your journey as an entrepreneur, either at Watt Power or one of your previous endeavors?
Yeah, it is amazing to connect with people all over the world through that alumni network. It has led to people that we've recruited in various companies. It has lent expertise to our scientific advisory boards for various companies. So the value of the alumni network, and specifically being able to find them through the alumni network that I believe BYU provides on its website, has been immensely valuable in us finding, retaining talent, as well as finding experts that we wouldn't normally be connected to. And the network is so large that most of the time we can find someone who has expertise without stretching too far.
Oh, great. Any specific examples come to mind where the network's been influential for you?
Yeah, the network was certainly important in finding my original mentor, who was incredibly helpful in getting my career going and getting me trained on many of the business aspects that I did not know coming into being a founder or a leader of a company, from the sales or business development side of things all the way to finance or executive leadership. So it was incredibly helpful in that regard, and has been a real blessing to my life since that time for that reason. And then we continue to benefit from other associations, even in our current company, from people that we've been able to connect with as we've sought to understand the market further in the company, to really get some key insights that would be very difficult to do without that alumni network.
We appreciate your sharing that. As we get to the end of our time here, I want to let you say anything you feel like adding and sharing with our audience, but also, I guess, is there any last message or advice you would have for BYU alumni or others in the academic community regarding, what it's like to step into entrepreneurship, or any advice for them?
It's worthwhile. I'm encouraging of going for it, but be ready for the challenges and difficulties that arise, and understand that most problems can be solved. So I I tend to focus around impossible versus possible problems, as opposed to harder, easier problems. And lots of problems are possible in this space, and there's lots of potential for being able to solve really important problems. Not even just from an industry perspective, but things that can really contribute and do something good for the broader community and the broader world. The ability to have a positive impact there may be most valuable, most deployable through entrepreneurship.
Thanks. Well, thanks, Olin. And like I say, any last words you want to say about Watt Power or entrepreneurship in general?
No, I think that that about sums it up. I think the only other piece that may be worth adding is that we of course always think that we can use all the help that we can get. So if anyone's interested in further discussions about what we're doing or just has questions, I'm always happy to respond.
Well, thank you. On behalf of our viewers, thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us today, and hope all goes well in Watt Powers and your future endeavors.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Adam, and it was really a privilege to be here.